Hello, I'm Tom Wallace, and this is Florida Funders' Angel Investing in Florida podcast series. If you are new to the show, Florida Funders is a unique hybrid venture capital fund as well as a crowdfunding platform where we focus on finding the most exciting young tech startups in the state of Florida and investing in them. Our motto is Sunshine State to Startup State. Really excited to have with me today Chris Sullivan. Chris is an old and dear friend, co-founder of Outback Steakhouse. Starting from one store here in Tampa, which is right around the corner from where I live, to over 1,000 locations in 23 countries, taking it public, then taking it private. What an amazing success story Chris and his partner Bob Basham have in Outback Steakhouse. So Chris, welcome. Thanks for coming and agreeing to be on the show. I guess, why don't you tell us your story? How did Outback come about? And how did you get started?
Well, thanks for having me, Tom. And I admired all the stuff you've done. And my journey is one that's just like a lot of Americans. It's one of those Horatio Alger kinds of stories. I'm from a large family, 7 kids. Dad was a FBI agent, very proud of his career, but we didn't ever have any money. It was one of those deals. So early in my life, it was about finding ways to make money. And like a lot of young people in my age, we all did that. And what that did is we created really, I understood if I wanted to do things and get things, I had to work. And so, I'm very fortunate to find a business that I loved early in my life. And that was Tenant Bar and waiting tables. And I loved the restaurant business. And I was going
right from the beginning.
Right. Well, I'm waiting tables and tending bar in places like Fort Lauderdale during the season, and you're making great money and you're having a great time and you're going, this is a blast. And there was a guy down there, the general manager of this restaurant, coincidentally, it's called Steak and Brew. And it was out of New York. It was a franchise. And this guy was 32 years old, making $100,000 as the general manager of that restaurant in 1971.
That was a lot of money in that
Driving
space.
a Corvette, nice condo overlooking the ocean down in Los Olas Boulevard. And I went, damn, this is a hell of a business. This is great, right? And I had agreed to, I went back to UK to graduate, and I agreed to come back down there as an assistant manager in his restaurant. And I was going to get 1 bartending shift a week because he was going to pay me a regular salary, and I needed some tip money and all that. So I had 1 bartending shift a week. And I was supposed to go down there in early January, and at my going away party in Lexington, Kentucky, I heard about this company called Steak and Ale out of Dallas, and they had one under construction in Louisville, Kentucky. And I got up the next morning to leave for Fort Lauderdale, and there'd been an ice storm come through, and I couldn't go anywhere. So there was no internet. There's nothing back then. Yeah. So I made a phone call to Dallas, Texas, and got this guy on the line from Steak and Ale. And he says, well, yeah, the guy that's going to run that deal is going to be in Louisville tomorrow if he can get in, if not the next day. For some reason, I said, I'd like to meet him. And I knew why, because going to Fort Lauderdale was going to be fun, but I was also going to be 24 years old in about a month. And I went, maybe I really think about taking the next step of my life here. And because Fort Lauderdale was a party. So anyway, to make a long story short, I ended up in Dallas, Texas, in an interview about 2 days later. And I told him I had a job. I was going to make $15,000 a year in Fort Lauderdale and a bartending shift. So they ended at the end of an 8-hour interview process and taking psychological testing. I'd never done any of that. And they offered me a job for $600 a month in Indianapolis. And I'm like, did you hear me? I've got a job in Florida for $15,000 a year. But it was one of those deals. They had 24 restaurants. They'd gone public in 1971. They were growing. I really liked this guy, Sid Kennedy, that I interviewed with in Louisville. And I took the job. And it was the greatest decision I ever made because a guy named Norman Brinker was the founder of Steak and Ale and then Bennigan's, and I had an opportunity to run Bennigan's. So I just found an industry I loved and had great mentors early in my career. And met Bob Basham and that company, and he and I ended up in Tampa together. First, we ran Bennigan's together, and then we ended up in Tampa with Chili's. And the next thing I know, we sell that. I'm going to move to California, where my family all is, and I love California. I still do. I live out there part time, as you know. And And I realized I hadn't made enough money to live in California because I was going to get out of the restaurant business. I was going to find something else to do.
Oh, so you're going to get out of the business entirely.
I was. In fact, I'm so smart. I turned down running Blockbuster Video for Wayne Huizenga because I didn't want a bunch of teenagers stealing videos. And so I was going to move to California, and I had no idea what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. And I was getting ready to turn 40, and I said, next chapter, let's go do it. And make a long story short, I decided I hadn't really made enough money to do that in California, and I came back to Tampa. Hadn't really moved yet, and Bob and I started talking, and we tried a couple of different things we looked at, and then we ended up deciding to do a steakhouse deal, named it Outback, and just had a blast.
And where did the Australian theme come from?
It was Crocodile Dundee was really hot.
I remember that.
And there was a guy, a tennis player, pro. You remember a guy named Pat Cash, and he was at East Lake Woodlands. And he was an Australian guy. So we went over and saw Pat Cash and said, hey, you know what? And we found out, and I didn't know it, but Pat says, this area is the number 2 tourist destination to and from Australia. I said, I had no idea.
Who knew?
He says, that's how I ended up here. And I don't know if that's really factual or not. And they were getting ready to have their bicentennial. And they also were running to have the Olympics. And so we went, and Americans loved it. And I took a chapter out of Norman Brinker's story. He originally, Steak and Ale was an English Tudor, themed restaurant. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going to be that. There was a company out in Colorado called Cork and Cleaver, and it was kind of a Mexican, Southwestern kind of looking building. And that's what he originally was going to build in Dallas. And he saw the movie Tom Jones in the mid-'60s. And 65... that was the British invasion when that all started happening. And all of a sudden, Americans started back going
Beatles.
The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and he saw this movie, Tom Jones, and saw the eating scene in it, and saw all the English thing going on, and changed his whole deal, and made it called Steak and Ale. And so Bob and I are talking, well, what's hot right now? And it was Australia and Crocodile Dundee, and we didn't want to do a Western themed steakhouse, and we didn't think Tampa.
Had you ever been to Australia, Devil?
No, I still hadn't. No. So we decided to do Outback Steakhouse, and it really worked very well, obviously. And we opened the first one here in Tampa in March of '88, and I took my family there to Australia in June of '88. But we befriended Australians in the United States. Uh-huh. And we met people out in the West Coast that were in the food and beverage business. Had a guy that owned retail shops, Australian retail shops in the D.C. area, and he became our consultant on. So we didn't offend anybody with things we'd write on menus and naming menu items and things like that. And
so when you started Outback, I have to ask you this: did you have any idea? Did you have the vision that would grow to 1,000? Did you have
no? Our game plan, our name of our original company is Multi-Venture Partners. And I had a guy, Bob and I both really liked this guy out in Chicago. He had Let Us Entertain You, Rich Melman. Rich Melman's one of the geniuses of the restaurant business. He had all these one-offs. Maggiano's is Rich Melman's restaurants, right? And that was one of his only big chain deals. But he had Let Us Entertain You. He had Fritz That's It. He had these different restaurants out of Chicago, and I loved going to these places because they were heavily themed, but the food was great and they were fun, right? And they were different than a Steak and Ale. They were different than a Fridays and things like that at the time. And so we said, well, let's stay here because I've been traveling extensively, building Bennigan's and building Steak and Ales, and I said, I had young kids at home. I said, I don't want to travel as much as I've been traveling, so let's just do this here in Tampa. In the Tampa Bay area, and let's do some. If the steakhouse thing works, we'll build 3 or 4 of those, and then maybe we'll find an Italian deal. We were debating whether to do something like Shell's. Before Shell's was open here, we saw a little restaurant in the railroad station in Pittsburgh. What was the name of that place? The Gandy Dancer.
The Gandy Dancer.
And we loved that place.
Was a great place.
We thought that was so cool. And we were kicking that thing around, and all of a sudden Shell's opened up, and we kind of went. It wasn't the same, but it was close to the same thing. And it's pasta and shrimp and stuff like that. So we did Outback, and then we were going to do something else, maybe whatever the next brand was going to be. So no, the intention was never to build a big company like that. It was to have a nice local Tampa-based company and have a lot of fun, and be kind of the Richard Melman group of Tampa and this in South, this part of Florida. And obviously we failed.
In a good way.
And had no discipline. Because a lot of people that worked with it at Steak and Ale had gone through all of us that it really helped run that company and build that company had left because Pillsbury owned us, and Pillsbury didn't know what to do with restaurant guys, entrepreneurs. They just, the big corporate packaged goods company had no clue what to do with a bunch of entrepreneurs and restaurant people. So, we all left that and we did our Chili's deal, and we built the #1 Chili's, franchise group at the time in the country, and Norman needed that back as a public company, so he bought us out, and so we started Outback, and it was great. It created so many adventures and so much fun, and changed our lives.
What an amazing,
it was great,
great
story.
fun. So in that journey, the whole Outback lessons learned, you had a couple of things that you want to share with our listeners that you really learned along the way that other founders might learn from.
And everybody says this. And I was having dinner the other night with Trudy Cooper, who's one of the founders of Outback, and her husband John, and they have On Swan now. John I knew when he was a head waiter for Steak and Ale here in Tampa, and he ended up working for us as Bennigan's. Trudy came and worked at Bennigan's, and ended up she's in charge of training. And we're talking about that the other night. And the biggest lesson learned here, it takes lots of really great engaged people to make anything successful. Nobody does anything by ourselves. Like Outback was not Chris Sullivan. It wasn't Chris Sullivan and Bob Basham. It wasn't Chris Sullivan, Bob Basham, Tim Gannon, and Trudy Cooper. It was so much more than that. It just takes a lot of people to make something work. And you look at things like, Apple, you look at Microsoft, there's so much more than the one or two people's names on those brands that made those things really successful. So all these things that really work, it might be, the idea might be with one or two people, but to bring these things forward and make them really work, it takes a bunch of people to do it.
That's very well said. Stephen Jobs was famous. One of his famous quotes was, "Business is a team sport."
It is. And that's one of the reasons I love business. It is a team. It's a team sport. It is a sport, and it's a blast. So anybody thinks they're the one that made something happen, walk away. And you run into those people. And you kind of go, and sometimes they have great ideas, but they wonder why they can't get from point A to point B, right? And sometimes it's money, but more than anything, a lot of times they're not really willing to open up and let other people into the game and let them play and participate. And when you do that, it looks like things really, really work out a lot better. So that's the biggest thing I've learned.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember when you and Bob won the Inc. 500 award.
Yeah.
And what an honor that is. Or was it the Entrepreneur
of the Year?
Entrepreneur of the Year. Which, what an honor.
I haven't won as many as you have, Tom.
which is, you won for the entire country. What an honor.
Which was really, that was crazy. Up against, oh God, I can't remember. A couple big
to win that award, I don't know if our listeners realize, I mean, you're up against the top companies in the country.
Well, we took an old brand and reinvigorated that kind of old idea, steakhouse, and I think we won it because of our partner programs. We shared.
That's what I was going to get to.
Yeah, it was one of the principles that we believed in.
You guys were very generous, and
these people are the ones running the business. They're the ones hiring the people to run these restaurants, and we wanted them to act like owners and behave like owners, so we made them owners, and it worked great. And I think that's
done that at the time, right?
No, they really hadn't. There was. Remember a little company called Sambo's? You ever remember? There was a little coffee shop dealers around, and they had a deal as a fraction of the action thing. They go, and I remember people that worked at Sambo's. In fact, a guy that was a head waiter for me back in Steak and Ale in D.C. was down in South Florida when I was in Florida building Steak and Ales, and I ran into Don, and he had these dark circles under his eyes, and the guy was 32 years old. And I said, Don, what's the matter? Are you sick? No, but I own 5% of this restaurant now. I'll be damned if I'm going to let anything go out. It was a 24-hour restaurant, right? And I went, wow. And then, some people had dabbled with that a little bit. Golden Corral has a little bit a program similar, but not the same. But we kind of did some research and didn't really find the right idea that somebody done. So we kind of made up our deal. And, to get somebody in 1988 to give you $25,000 for a 10% interest in a restaurant was unbelievable. And the first guy we did that with was...
So your managers had to buy in.
$25,000 cash. We didn't lend them money. They couldn't earn it. Because to me and Bob, we felt like if somebody could come up with $25,000, they had done something. They had people believed in them, or they had saved that much money. That was a lot more money than anybody's putting down on a house back then, right?
A lot of money.
And so it said something about their character. It said something about their work ethic that they got it, right?
Yeah.
So the first guy we went after was a fellow by the name of Kevin Toomey. He was up at running a Houston's in Lenox Square in Atlanta. And Kevin had used to work with us at Steak and Ale. And so I knew Kevin, really great operator. And we'd heard through the grapevine that he wasn't that happy working. The founder of Houston's, a guy named George Beal, who's a wonderful guy, but really tough. And he lived right down the street from this restaurant Kevin's running it. And the word on the street was, Kevin's looking to make a change. So we got a hold of Kevin and presented him this program. And he was making about $75,000 a year in 1987. And, he was at a prestigious location. And, it was a big deal for a guy running a restaurant. But he had no ownership interest, zero.
Yeah.
So we presented the idea, $40,000 a year. You give us $25,000, which basically covered their training cost and, some other expenses associated with them getting into the business. And he jumped at it and came down to Tampa and opened our second restaurant, not our first restaurant. We got it delayed. So another fellow, we hired another guy that would work with us at Steak and Ale too, Larry Siegel, and he jumped at it. And, there's $25,000. They came up with money like that. They want to be our partners, and they were remarkable. And pretty soon, people are going, can I do this here? Can I do this there? Can I do this there? And we created a company of owners. Yeah, and it was great. Story. It was fun.
That's a great story. Switching over to the investment side, when did you start angel investing? Tell us how you got into it and what were some of your early investments?
First of all, I'm a C student from Kentucky. So, angel, I didn't really start doing angel investing in any serious level until probably 10 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when we, I guess that's around the time that Obamacare got passed, and I was really concerned about the restaurant industry and the company we have, Outback, and all the employees in there. And I was really concerned about the problem with the single women or the women with children that really were having a tough time paying for healthcare. And we had an inverted, what I call inverted premium program at Outback, where the one we originally rolled out was $17 a month for a $250 deductible coverage. And we had 7% of our employees take it, not including management. That was all.
That's
just
7%.
Huh?
Only 7%.
Only 7%, because they just didn't think that was, and it was almost 90% female that would take it, right? And I just went, it's because they don't make enough money. At that $17 is a big deal. I got the guys; they're invincible. I got the kitchen guys, and they just didn't think they needed it. So I started to figure out how are people going to make more money in this industry, because they're going to have to pay for healthcare. It's going to get expensive, and as employers with this many people, it's going to be a real problem for us. So I started thinking about what in the technology world, what can we do in the restaurant business, and that's where I started thinking about using technology to make the server experience, the employee and the customer experience more seamless. And that's where we came up with the concept MenuPad. Found this small company in Australia that was muddling along, made an investment in that. And that was my first kind of serious foray into, that level of investing that, it was about something that angel investing, I thought could really become something significant, because I really felt like that it was going to allow servers to wait on more tables. And also we learned pretty quickly that PPAs per person, what people would spend, went up in restaurants when the device to order from was always at their table. And so, as you remember, we opened Carmel Cafe and Carmel Kitchen with that. Dumbest thing I ever did was open up a restaurant, open to the public, and the technology wasn't perfected yet. That wasn't very smart. But that was the real first major kind of investment I made at the angel side of it. And that one is, I basically sold it last year after 8 years and invested way too much money on it, because I was also the angel investor and the primary investor, except for some people in the Tampa Bay area invested some money in it. Unfortunately, that one hasn't worked out. Eventually, it will work out, because from that, we created this platform called Omnivore, and that was another angel investment. But I recognized my era in getting in the app business and trying to go to point of sales. I remember taking the idea up to Columbia, Maryland, and meeting with the CEO and the CTO of Micros and explained what the product was. And they said, Chris, that's a great idea. That's kind of custom work. We really don't want to do any of that. But, if you get it developed the way it looks like you're getting it there, we'll be glad to let you, run it through our systems. And they're about the only point of sale company that will let us do that, because all these point of sale companies eventually didn't want any outside deals. They didn't want any other apps unless they did an open table. They didn't, if you think about open table, which became a big idea, is a big idea. The point of sale companies would not let them run their app through their point of sale system. So you would see the open table tablet at the host stand, right?
It wasn't integrated.
Yeah. And when you started thinking about how technology is going to work like that, so my major angel investing is there. Then I made a small investment with you guys at Florida Funders, so I've not been a big angel investment person, but I think Florida Funders is a great idea, and I think it's great because people need this kind of influx of cash. Also, you guys give people a lot of guidance. I mean, this is a great organization.
Well, thank you.
And I wish you'd been around 10 years ago when I was doing this, because it'd been fun.
Well, I don't think our listeners probably realize how innovative you are in technology in the restaurant space. When you were doing, I remember on Carmel Cafe, when you were doing menu pad, it was nowhere. I mean, now you go in every airport and you see these. Yeah. These menu pads. I don't know if that's the same product.
It's not the same product, but there was a guy. Yeah, there's a guy up in. He bought from Aramark in Philadelphia. He bought the terminal business in New York at the JetBlue terminal, and his idea, and he created that technology. And he created that for that first terminal up there. And I remember getting over talking to him and seeing if there's something we could do together. And he said, no, I'm just going to focus on this airport thing and stuff like that. And I said, okay, great. And he did that. And, he's done really well with that. But, the angel investing side of it, like in the family office business, right? Mm-hmm. So Paladin, which is muddled along, but, we've got some good clients now, and it's finally looking like it's got a chance to do some good things. But here you are, family office. So I joined IPI, which is a family office organization, a national one, and I went to 2 meetings. And the number one problem, this is 15 years ago, mm-hmm. and the number one problem was technology, software for family offices, right? Yeah. And there really wasn't any products out there that really doing that. So Joe Krieger, who was a banker, a trust company officer at the bank, we got together. She came over to run the family office, and so we decided that we would try to solve that problem. So we've been working on that. That's been an angel investing game, got into, mm-hmm. and that one has a chance to be a success. And because it's a product that gives people these family offices, and it gives families, multi-generational families, the opportunity to look at what's going on in their lives at a push of a button, using digital technology to look at that, taking all your records, all that paper you have, and all these file cabinets, all these people have that, put it into place. Documents. Yeah, don't have to call your lawyer to get it. Don't have to call your accountant to get it. You do all those kinds of things, and the security side of it now, it's we're close on it. We're more than close. I mean, you've got blockchain technology with it now and all that, which is very important on the security side of it. But it's a fun game to play. Omnivore. With the menu pad business, we realized that these point of sale companies were not going to play. They wanted their own
in products. The restaurant space.
Yeah, the rest of the hospitality space. Yeah, they weren't going to play. So this little Australian company, this guy had a menu pad product similar to what we had, mm-hmm. but there was another guy in San Francisco that we had run into that had this idea that he could create an API that would lay into the restaurants, and the point of sale companies could write to that API, and the apps write to that API and integrate. Mm-hmm. And I said, that is the answer. Yeah. Now, to get the point of sale companies to allow that to happen was going to be the hard thing to do. But we went forward, developed the product, and it's been a long 7 years. Mm-hmm. It's been more than angel investing, to say the least. But we've got some great partners in it now: Coca-Cola, PFG, some good, Jim Vennick, some other people around town, Lee Arnold, and we've got a heck of a company now, which we relocated recently from California here to Tampa.
Thank you. We love to see that.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about coming to Tampa is there's lots of talent around here. There's a lot of people coming out of these universities, lots of people in that can do development. So the idea that you have to go to Silicon Valley or go to Austin, Texas, and that's or the Carolinas, just isn't true anymore.
Yeah, we're firm believers in that. And if anything, we're seeing, my nephew just moved from San Francisco to Fort Lauderdale to work for Magically. And, in San Francisco and California, that there is talent, but the talent's very expensive, and you're competing against Facebook and Google and all, these companies are trying to hire the same people. So.
Well, Mike Wire, who's the CEO of Omnivore, he said one of the biggest problems out there, you hire a developer, you get them up to really the speed they need to get to, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Somebody else just comes in, buys them from you, etc. Yeah. And I'm sure a little of that'll go on around here from time to time, but you're trying to build an organization where people want to stay and work with you. But this Omnivore idea looks like it's got great legs. We're in over 19,000 locations now, and it's we'll double that this year, and we'll go positive cash flow sometime in 2020. Mm-hmm. They say third quarter, I say second, but anyway, they say fourth, I say third.
Now, you brought up the founder, Mike Weiss.
Mike Wire.
I'm sorry, Mike Wire.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So when you're looking at angel investing, how much emphasis do you put on the jockey, using racing terminology? For listeners, Chris is a big horse racing guy.
Mike was working with MenuPad, right? Mm-hmm. So this founder of, he called it Positronics. Yeah, it's called Positronics, was the name of the original company out in San Francisco. And so he had kind of the basis started on it, and he had some good things going with it, but he really didn't know how to get it really where it needed to be. So I took Mike out of the MenuPad business and moved him to California to work side by side with this guy. Mm-hmm. And I came to understand very quickly, this guy was the wrong guy to have in there. Mm-hmm. And Mike was the right guy to have this, to drive this. So to make a long story, we bought him out of the business, and Mike took over running the business. And then he ran out of California until the end of this year. In December, and moved the company here, and they relocated here, and they're here. Mm-hmm. But it takes that right person. And Mike had an extensive background in development in the banking business and the banking security business, and he really gets it. And he really understood what the problem was in the restaurant industry. And he understood that the point of sale companies really needed this platform, and the apps and needed this program. So, we put together the company that's making that happen. And we've got a marketplace, and then Coca-Cola now it's white labeled the marketplace in this, and they're out there adding value to their customers, and taking us into big restaurant companies. Apple loves the product; they're going in with that, and MenuPad, they love that product with the other company we sold it to, and so things are really starting to happen. And the industry, which the restaurant industry is very slow to adapt sometimes. Mm-hmm. When you travel a lot. So you go to Europe, you've been paying at the table with credit cards in Europe for a decade, right? That's a recent phenomenon in the United States, right?
Yeah.
And so, these kinds of technologies we're behind on, but it's happening. And I'm happy to say we were fairly early in the game. And with the changes of all the point of sale systems that are trying to, change, it's very difficult for them to change. What's Omnivore do for them? It makes it so people can take their older systems, make them work, not have to rip them out yet. And, and all of a sudden this back of the house changes, and they need, more cloud, connectivity and things like that. Those things will evolve. So any industry that doesn't stay relevant to the consumer and isn't able to do the kinds of business with people, like you want to do a delivery, you want to get delivery, you don't have to get on the phone, right? Nobody does that. You want to go on the internet.
I was going to ask you about Cloud Kitchen. I don't know if you followed Cloud Kitchen, Travis Kalanick's new company, and a lot of people think that's going to change the restaurant industry. The idea of having to go to restaurant people, these virtual kitchens and much of the food being delivered. I like the customer. I like the dining experience. I always dine out, but
there's no doubt that delivery's had an impact, and it's going to continue to have an impact. No doubt about it. And there's one called Kitchen United that's doing the same thing out in LA, and they're a little bit further along than Cloud Kitchen is. But the idea of doing that makes a lot of sense. Instead of spending a couple $1 million to build a full service location, you can build something out for $400,000. And if you can do $2 million or $1 million out of that, that's great, right?
Yeah.
But people need socialization, right? And they're going to want it. They want the experiences. You know,
I know I do.
I mean, and I just don't want to eat home every night.
Yeah.
You know, and I never eat. The only reason my wife married me is because she didn't have to cook. You know? So we eat out quite a bit. But it's here. It's projected to be 30% of the sales by the end of the decade, by 2030. Now it might be 25, might be 35. But restaurants are still going to be here, and they're going to be fun. And the quantity and quality of restaurants out there is remarkable. Look at our own area, what's happened in the restaurant scene over the last 5 years. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a blast.
Yeah.
So, and you combine, now most of the restaurants, the new restaurants are not using a lot of technology yet, right?
Yeah.
They're not, but they're getting ready to. And the big chains are, finally started to do it because it's expensive to change out a restaurant service system.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. The point of sale system has to adjust, have to train all these people to do it differently. But to be honest with you, the new technologies are less expensive really to operate than the old technologies.
What do you think is the biggest impact we're going to see in the restaurant industry in the next 5 years or so from a technology standpoint?
I think everything you do with the restaurant, other than going in and saying hi to them, is going to be done digitally. I think you'll pre-order meals before you go to restaurants. You'll have the capability to do that. You'll prepay if you want to. You'll let me give you, say you're going out to dinner tonight and you have a party of 6, and you're going to go to Fleming's. Well, you will go and you'll pull up the app. And if you happen to know what your people like to drink, or you certain wines you want at the table, or there's some appetizers, and you kind of called your friends and put the deal together. You'll pre-order some appetizers. You'll tell them what kind of water you want. You might order wine. You might know that Jimmy likes margaritas and he likes this, and Susie likes this and this. And so when you go sit down, instead of going through the 10-minute drill, all of a sudden people start bringing stuff to your table. Mm-hmm. It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
That'll be a big difference.
Yeah.
A big, big difference.
Yeah.
You might be driving. You do it now. You can driving down the street at a stoplight, get on the phone and boom, 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 and order your food, right?
Yeah.
And then either have it delivered or pick it up. I mean, all these things are going to change dramatically. How you communicate with your employees is all going to be done digitally. It's not going to be, look at the wall and see a schedule on the wall. All this is stuff being done. And, these like Slack, as a communication vehicle that, being used, and whatever, there's other ones that are being used. So instead of emailing your employees with things, you're texting them, right? Or you're doing the Slack or whatever you're doing, right? Yeah. So there's different ways to communicate. Same thing's happening with customer interactions with businesses. It's not email. Sure. It's all these other things, right?
Yeah.
The restaurants, having the Instagram and having these sites like this where people are just sharing their experiences with everybody, the pictures. That's just free marketing, right?
Well, Chris, this has been great. Thank you. What an amazing story. Congratulations. Amazing career. It's just been so much fun to watch what you've done over the years, and you've done it with such grace, and you give back so much. And so really appreciate you coming in, and I know our listeners are really going to enjoy this and continued success.
Thanks, Tom. Always a pleasure being with you, buddy.
Oh.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Florida Funders is an early-stage venture capital firm that blends a venture fund and a crowdfunding platform. They are investing in some of the most exciting early-stage technology companies in the state of Florida.